under northern Australia's sizzling sun, even the birds take whatever shade they can get. There's plenty to drink in the wet season, but you still need to be careful. What makes our next story so amazing is that everyone involved survived an incredible 26-day ordeal with no provisions and absolutely no knowledge of the area.
There's just plain gut survival. That's all. Lived for today, and when we stop walking, we die, sort of thing.
You know, basically they knew how to keep on track and they knew how to survive out there.
Which one? This one here?
Chris and Debbie Holt ran King Edward River Station in January 1992 when they first met Inspector Con Calamiri.
They're the ones that were walking around the circle.
Yeah, that hill.
He said, I'll take
The three shared a common experience and have been friends ever since. They were all involved in the biggest search in Australian history.
2 or 3 of them wandered into the King Edward River homestead, and that's what started the whole thing rolling.
Square kilometre King Edward River cattle station is the last outpost in the wilderness of the northwest. That's why the Holt family was so shocked when a couple of Asian people happened to stumble onto their land.
They could have gone south down to Prince Regent Park and nobody would have ever even known they'd come to Australia if they'd headed due south, probably.
They didn't want to come in until they had a wash, so we took them around to the side of the house. And I looked down, they had rags wrapped around their feet, and we were really beginning to wonder where they'd come from.
That was just the beginning. The Holts soon got an inkling that a few more visitors were on the way.
I knew that the girl was agitated, so I gave her a piece of paper, and she drew a boat on it with 56 on the side and the Chinese flag, and they kept repeating Beijing, so we gathered that that's where they'd come from. But I thought that they'd been on the boat for 56 days, not that there were 56 people on it. So my husband and children were bringing them all in, and there were 30 there by 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
You know, some of them have been out there a couple of weeks and hadn't seen, you know, any sign of habitation, because really there's nobody lives in that country at all or goes into it. And it's not run as pastoral country. So I mean, you've got no roads, no tracks, no fences, you know, no dams, bores or anything like that.
The visitors were refugees from China. They had stranded their 16-metre wooden-hulled boat on mudflats a few weeks earlier, and they'd finally found help. The Holts called the police. Coast Watch and customs officers also moved in. 5 helicopters, dozens of vehicles, and 4 aircraft, including an Army Hercules for supplies. 32 refugees had been found. The search was on for the rest.
And I thought, well, if there's another 24 or so out there, where the hell are they?
Amid fears that some may have perished in the heat, the fate of the rest of the group is unknown. Coast Watch planes and helicopters are searching the scrub, and a team of immigration and customs officials arrived at the station.
Using interpreters, police worked out that the refugees had spent up to 2 weeks with their stranded boat before trying to walk for help. The 56, 9 women and 47 men had argued over directions and split up into several groups.
They worked out whether they go across this creek or go round it. And they had a big argument there, apparently. Some crossed the creek and the others went round the end of the creek because they didn't want to cross it with the crocs in there and all that.
The men and women kept expecting to find a village, but there was none to find. They headed southeast by keeping the sun over their left shoulder in the morning and over their right shoulder in the afternoon.
And when they went round the end of the creek, there's nothing, there's no roads, there's no river, there's nothing for them to follow. It's just sort of open track, open bush, and they went straight out into the wilderness, so to speak.
Some of the groups, the whole way they went, they had water all the time, and yet there were some other groups were actually drinking their own urine. They'd gone for 3 days without water, and they were at that stage because they'd taken a different track in the country.
My emergency services unit were quite confident in the fact we wouldn't find them all. They sent up 40 body bags for me to put them in when we found them.
The various groups spent their days resting under trees to escape the 45-degree heat. That made them hard to spot from the air, but an aircraft located campfires at night, which the helicopters could check in the morning. After 19 days in the bush, only one man remained lost.
We'd found 55 and by that time we were sort of getting to that stage where we'd not given up hope, but we're getting a bit apprehensive about the last fella because he was the one that they'd left at the creek that couldn't get across because he had bad legs.
On the last day of looking, that man was found in the southernmost part of the search area. He'd walked an excruciating 200 kilometres, and these dramatic snapshots show he couldn't have gone any further.
We saw him dragging himself along the track and he had no water with him, or what he had was about that much in the bottom of a bottle and it was a mouldy green colour, no food, and he had a bamboo stick about that long that he was dragging himself on his knees along the track and he was just about had it. His tongue was hanging out and he looked like he was another half an hour or so, I reckon, anyway, that's my view. Half an hour or so he probably would have been dead.
When we come back, we'll show you how to help the searchers if you're ever lost. And we'll point to some bush tucker up here that even a child could find.
By splitting up, that's what extended the life of the search, so to speak, because there were just that many of them split up in such a big area. Trying to find them all made it quite a hard task.
So are we getting the other machines out?
Well, that's what Lance is going to start working up this.
No, we're getting the other ones.
It took 2.5 weeks to find all 56 refugees, and it was no easy task.
It's hard to realise how difficult it is to find those people in that terrain up there because it's some of the roughest in the country and it's hard enough to spot a person on the ground from the air at the best of times.
Lance Conley was one of the chopper pilots sent in to search. He managed to rescue a few refugees, but his job would have been far easier if they'd stuck together.
Also, with most of the boat people, a lot of them had dull clothing, which made it even harder. When you're looking for someone on the ground, most of the time the only thing that'll give them away is brightly coloured clothing, and maybe if they have matches and light a fire.
Up in the air with Lance, you can see the problem searchers faced. Dark clothing blends right in with this bush. If you are lost and a search is on, even if you can't start a signal fire, there are still a few things you can do to increase your chances of being seen.
Head for higher ground, and any bright clothing or blankets, whatever, if they spread it out on the ground like a mat, that's also makes it quite a bit easier for us to see from the air.
They killed snakes, a couple of snakes, rock pythons we gathered they were. They carried the dry beat. One of them was telling us he used to catch pigeons with his bare hands, sort of coax them down and then grab them and flick their heads off and cook them up and eat them.
This was a tough group, and that's why they all made it. They also bent nails from their boat to use as fishing hooks, but they were so confident that civilization was nearby, they left their lines in the water when they moved on. When they were found, some of the group still had bags of this edible plant with them. It's called portulaca, and they thought they could use it because a similar plant grows up in Asia. It's not exactly a can of baked beans, but you can get by on it. There's a lot of bush tucker out there, but it's not always easy to recognise. Native bees, for example, are hard to find, but they don't sting and they make loads of honey. There are a few edible plants easy to recognise and remember. You don't have to be an expert to find a small feast. This is a boab nut. You can find these things all year round, up in the tree or down on the ground. If they're green, you cook them in the fire, but if they're dry, you just eat them like this. Tastes a bit like powdered milk. In Africa, they call this stuff monkey bread. You can easily recognise these bush passion fruit by the spindly little casings. They're ripe when they're yellow and they're beautiful to eat. Even without this local knowledge, the refugees did pretty well. Some were so thirsty they drank urine, and that's a definite no-no, which will only make you more thirsty. But you've got to admire their raw courage in a strange country with many hazards. In fact, they were lucky not to have become a meal themselves.
Snakes, crocodiles. Some of the crocodiles we saw would be in excess of 7-8 metres. Wild dog, dingoes, and of course the Mickey bulls. They are pretty territorial. And that was my biggest worry, was the bulls more than anything. Yet they just walked straight through them and never had any problems with them at all.
After the break, a survivor who had nowhere to walk and only half a handy bush trick to get out of trouble.
Chap came down and said, "Boy, am I glad to see you." And I said, "Not half as glad as I am to see you."